Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the third webinar in our series diving into the iMasons 2024 State of the Industry Report we launched last month. This segment is focused on Planet. Before we get started, I wanted to touch on a few logistics. This is an interactive session. We want your input. I encourage you to provide your thoughts in the comments area of the live stream and engage with other audience members as we go along. You can also submit questions in the comments area, and our team will relay them to us during the live stream. All this content is important and very helpful as we continue to gather insights and fine-tune our approach to tackling these big challenges. Thanks again for spending your valuable time with us. So first, my name is Dean Nelson. I'm the founder and chairman of iMasons. We are a professional association with over 6,000 people around the world, representing over $200 billion of infrastructure projects in 130 countries. We launched our community in 2016 to unite the builders of the digital age. Today, we are proud to have united the industry on a greater digital future. Over the last year, we engaged over 500 contributors across 50 countries to gather their input for this report. This included member meetings, advisory council sessions, collaboration workshops with our strategic partners, and one-on-one conversations with owners of some of the largest digital infrastructure platforms in the world. Pardon me. In accordance with iMasons' values, all content was anonymized except where noted in the publication. These insights were then used to create the State of the Industry Report. The report provides a holistic picture of the importance of digital infrastructure and a guide to strategic decisions about where, when, and how digital infrastructure is built, operated, and maintained. We strongly believe it is essential that this growth occurs in an economically, ecologically, and socially responsible and sustainable manner. The report starts with a baselining of the industry. In 2021, iMasons reported that the digital infrastructure industry included 7 million data center locations around the world, with a combined capacity of 105 gigawatts and an annual electricity consumption of 594 terawatt hours, representing 2.4% of the global electricity draw. That's digital infrastructure. Demand for electronic services will double and could triple the size of the industry over the next decade, primarily driven by AI. I've mentioned this in the last 3 webinars, but I would be remiss if I did not state that in my 35 years in this industry, I have never seen this pace of growth. It was big when the report was launched, but in the last week's webinar, Colby Cox from DC Bytes shared another staggering number. Since we first gathered the data at the beginning of the year, there has been an additional 12% capacity growth. Not just forecasted, delivered, in construction, like 4 different categories, 12% additional growth just in less than 5 months. This makes the insights from the report and our discussions today even more relevant. So in the report, we identified 4 critical challenges to fulfill this unprecedented demand. These challenges center on access to power capacity, attracting and retaining people, addressing industry perception to ensure we are a good neighbor where we operate, and maintaining our commitments to protect the planet. So today, we are focused on the planet section, and I'm super excited to have one of our industry experts joining me, Miranda Gardiner. Miranda is the executive director of the iMasons Climate Accord. With 16 plus years of experience, she is passionate about the environment and improving sustainability practices through local and global engagements, with a proven record of working for international organizations like Meta, Borough Happold, and KfW. In 2020, Miranda was recognized by the U.S. Green Building Council as a lead fellow. Additionally, she is a distance running coach and cycling instructor who believes that caring for oneself resonates in caring for the planet. She has completed 8 marathons and 4 ultramarathons. Welcome to the webinar, Miranda.
Thanks, Dean, for having me, and thanks for the kind bio and words there.
Yeah, I actually think of what we're doing with the Climate Accord correlates to one of your personal passions I just mentioned. That's to protect the planet. It's essentially an ultra marathon, but it is one that we have to complete together for sure. But yeah, we're getting all geared up for it. All right, we'll tell you what. Before I go into the interview, I want to set some context on the formation of the ICA and your role. So this started on February 22nd, 2022 at a thing we called Shea Bellotti. And so we brought together our advisory council leaders, as you can see in this picture, at Christian Bellotti's house. He's the guy in the middle. And we gave them a task. These leaders represent some of the biggest portfolios in the world. We said, can you find one thing that we can do together as an industry to tackle climate change. 6.5 hours later, and I'm not exaggerating, we had the initial formation of the Climate Accord. So now if you fast forward 6 weeks, we announced that in Monaco with 73 companies signed up. And that included AWS, Google, Meta, and Microsoft joining the governing body. So a little over a year ago, you stepped in as executive director to drive the program. So welcome and thank you for your leadership in this. So my first question, yes, my first question to you, Miranda, is what is the Climate Accord? Give us more details around the content.
Yeah. So, Dean, you've laid out the framework here. Since joining, and since that kind of inception 2 years ago, we just hit our second birthday. We now have over 250. I think we're closing in on like 270, 280 companies, meaning our member companies involved in the Climate Accord, with kind of our North Star mission being net zero carbon across digital infrastructure. And as we know from recent reports, we know this. Emissions from the 2020 baselines, a lot of our partners have signed, are up. And I mean, this is public information. So, I mean, again, for this to be a North Star, it's a lofty ambition and a lofty goal. That said, we are looking at this through really 3 strategic pillars. Materials, meaning the kind of building and the core and shell of our facility, so our data centers, if you will. The equipment, what's going into the building, whether it's MEP or the computing, IT and hardware, and then the power, what really enables all of this to come together. And the framework that has this is really just kind of holistic in the approach on this. We're not going to solve separately, we're going to solve it together. And I think for me, that was the excitement about joining the Climate Accord and what I've seen over the past year. We have people who are here to collaborate and work together on this kind of, target that we've got set forward for us.
Yeah, we got an amazing community. And I think that what I like about it is, net zero carbon. So we're all focusing on a decarbonization of digital infrastructure. And I think what's most important here is that we provided a structure, a taxonomy, a framework on how. And it's a very practical one. And that came from the origins of the conversations at Shea Bellotti, that the materials, as you said, it's very simply, and I explain this to my daughter and to my wife, like the people that are in it, but they use these devices all the time. So what does it mean? Well, it simply is that, like you said, the core and shell, it's the building. There's an embodied carbon footprint in the building, the materials aspect of it, concrete, steel, copper, et cetera. And then the stuff we put in it, the equipment, that's IT, that's MVP, et cetera. And then of course the power that enables all that work to happen. So I think that structure has stayed consistent when it comes down to how we're approaching it. And this is a big problem, but we simplified it down to that to say, if you simply categorize in that manner, we can go after these and decarbonize in those buckets, right? But holistically, we need to also have a governance structure around this, right? So, we've got a maturity model. So you want to talk a little bit about the structure on that?
Yeah. So 2 pieces, actually. You're right, Dean, in terms of this governance. One being the maturity model. And this is what we're really looking at to enable that tracking of the carbon. It's for our companies and organizations to look internally and map with their peers, with the community that we have here on those categories that we outlined. Are they further along in their journey when it comes to materials versus power, or vice versa? Who are the partners that are in the mix with them providing some of these component parts that they can, again, align on their sustainability or their carbon emission targets? We like to talk about that a lot. This alignment really helps a baseline setting across a portfolio. And we do, again, we've got the companies in the room that are, our hyperscaler founders, Google, Meta, AWS, Microsoft, and we have one person, startups that are in this. How do you all move along this journey together? Well, again, it's looking at it from the component parts. And then kind of on the second piece of that is this carbon label concept thing that you kicked off, kind of the nutrition label of embodied carbon, if you want to break it down that way. And this is where we are trying to get into the weeds of the different pieces, whether it's something like an environmental product declaration, the EPD of it, an LCA, a life cycle assessment or analysis of it. It's really kind of factoring in the macro and the micro levels so that, again, as I said, all companies along that journey have their place in the mix, and we can look at it from the big picture of our target that we've set. Yeah,
and I remember Tom Furlong brought this up because we were having a debate about, we got the materials, equipment, and power, but how do you normalize? And so this is where the maturity model came up, and that was the equalizer to say everybody's going to be at a different point in their journey. You might be at the starting. You might be accelerated and have one of the biggest portfolios in the world, but we're all following that same journey. So the maturity model says it's okay wherever you are, whatever stage you're in. The whole point here is that you need to continue on, and you can learn from the folks that are ahead in the stages about what you can apply, so you don't have to make mistakes or spend a lot of money to do things. You literally can now adopt things and move forward. So I love the concept of that. So let's
Absolutely. Yeah.
let's talk a
But
little
Dean,
bit
I
more
guess
about
that's also the
yeah.
whole vision of the ICA too. That again, wherever you are along in this journey, the commitment we're asking out of you is that you're on the journey. You know, again, you're crawling, you're walking, however you want to kind of use the analogy on it, because how hard and fast this is moving, we cannot be siloed. We cannot leave people behind. It really is, again, that kind of collective effort moving together.
Yeah,
Keep going. Let's keep chatting.
It lines directly to the community aspect of this. This is we're all in it together, right? This
Yeah,
is this what
totally.
sustainability is a team sport, I think you call all the time. So the point is, how do we come together on this? Well, let's talk a little about who's involved. We mentioned there's like 260 some odd companies, but give me a little insights there.
Yeah, so 260, 270 again, where it is. I believe we're over 6 trillion in combined market cap of them. We've highlighted some of the kind of big players and the named participants. That also though includes more than half of our membership in the co-location facility group. So again, really the owner operators that we've got in this space, and then it breaks down kind of every component area from that. Every single kind of type of company is represented. So service providers, the AEC community, I mean architecture, engineering, construction, which is really my background and where I've come from. Trade associations are in the mix. So again, these partnerships that we have so that we can lean on each other's strengths and how we deliver to the market, who we're talking to, et cetera, consultants, manufacturers. I mean, it's really the technology of it. It's pretty exciting to see this because through our governing body, through our working groups, and then all of these companies, we've got the representation across the bigger chain. And so we can really kind of look at it in that entirety.
Yeah, and one of the core tenets from us was also that we need to lead with our wallet. And if you think about that, $6 trillion with a T, right? Like we talk about this, it's insane to me. You take the combined market cap of all these companies, 266 companies, something like that. There is a lot of influence that can happen. And so hence the structure that we're putting together to make sure that these companies are all aligned on that objective, that goal, that North Star, decarbonization through this model. So what also I think is important is that there's another element around how we get the work done. So we forgot to mention the work groups themselves, because we've got these big companies, right, that are involved in it, but they've also now appointed people to come in and actually contribute directly to how do we move forward on these different categories. So can you talk a little bit about the work groups?
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe we'll use the maturity model as an example because we're right in the thick of getting the maturity model published and out the door. Our first round of review of the document went to our working groups and our governing bodies. They've been talking about a lot of the details. We finally kind of got the first draft in writing. Over 27% of the companies are represented between the working groups and the governing body. And that's not because we don't want 100%. It's that, you know, people need their time and have to analyze and do this. From just that subsector, over 200 comments came back on the first round of the maturity model. So now we're in this kind of review process of addressing and analyzing what do we need to kind of dig deeper on? Where are the instructional components of this? Are there pieces that are out of sync with each other? Because again, we want it to be kind of that framework of the materials, power, and equipment. Then we're going to be going to kind of a next round of this review with subject matter experts we have from companies that are perhaps not on a working group. We even have a sustainability committee, as we know, on the iMasons side. They have been really integral to providing feedback. And again, connecting to the bigger iMason body of it. So we are doing our due diligence to ensure that if we are issuing a document like this from our industry, it is really from our industry. We are getting all of these layers of feedback and revision into it. And so again, as you put it, we've got a governing body, we've got working groups, we've got subject matter experts, and then we've got the support of the iMasons through again, innovation committee, the sustainability committee, our Gen Z millennial committee, they are all in the weeds of kind of supporting the various areas that they can bring their expertise to, so that this becomes a robust and holistic opportunity for us to all get engaged.
Yeah, and I love it because this is the whole charter of iMasons and then the focus of the program for the climate accord. Like, it's all coming together. And I would say that we've successfully united the industry on decarbonization. That's a big thing because now we've got the weight behind the companies and the people and the expertise to drive it. But the report highlights that we have some pretty significant risks. As I mentioned at the beginning, unprecedented global growth of digital infrastructure. Let me go into that statement from Colby Cox. He mentioned in the Power webinar last week that we're on track to double, of course, the digital infrastructure globally in the next 5 years. We believe it's going to be in the next 2 to 3, and potentially triple it right in the 10 years. But it's going faster. The reason is, he said there was 12.5 gigawatts globally added to the pipeline in the last 5 months. 12.5 gigawatts. So if you just look at that, we've already accelerated. Even in that 5 months, we've accelerated faster than we expected. So that means if we triple infrastructure, this is building buildings, putting equipment in, and power, we could also triple the carbon footprint. This is the challenge, right? So if you look at, since that data was gathered in January this year, right? Let me just provide an important quote that came out of the report because it is so spot on right now. In today's world, rapid industry growth and decarbonization are diametrically opposed. It's like oil and water. The planet cannot lose out to the demand for digital services and shareholder value. We have a tension here, right? Essentially, the risk is growth at all costs. And we stress that in the report. Not that people are just giving up. The point is, we have massive growth. The carbon's going to get bigger before it gets smaller. And so it is even more important right now because we are at a very pivotal moment, I think, in our industry and the planet itself about what we do. So Miranda, given the current start of the market, there seems to be a misalignment on the sustainability targets and the goals and the current speed to market approach that we've got. So what are you hearing about how we can keep on target?
Yeah. I would like to back up though too, Dean, just for some of the additional stats that we have when we're talking about this. When we're looking at things like, our concrete, our steel, the big ticket items to build it out, this is responsible for 25% of the global carbon emissions. I mean, that's a number when we're seeing the growth coming. Now we know we're responsible for that. We also know that, potentially, again, what we're witnessing with scope 3 emissions, and these are the ones, for those unfamiliar with this, the ones that we're sort of indirectly responsible for, but that impact our business cycle. And this is 80% of carbon footprint. And yet our industry is reporting, less than a quarter of our industry is reporting on their scope 3 emissions. So again, to your point of this kind of what is going on and the imbalance of what we're seeing and requiring, to me, regulatory is going to push a lot of this. We're seeing it coming out of the EU. We're also seeing it even from here at home, meaning the US, where you and I are based, when it comes to this. The US Securities and Exchange Commission, so the SEC, has issued their mandates on disclosing GHG emissions and climate-related risks. They've shifted a little bit on some of their scope 3 emissions in the reporting, and yet then we have California coming in and driving it hard home, and their requirements. If you do business in California, not if you build there, but if you do business there, you're going to have to report too. So again, when you're hearing all of this stuff, it's coming down the pipeline. And what is really encouraging for me, and part of the conversations that we're having with all these players that we're talking about, is everyone is looking at this on a global scale, meaning they are aligning to the requirements that are coming. So it's not, well, this isn't happening to me and fill in the blank, so I'm, putting my head in the sand. Instead, it's this acknowledgement and recognition of the responsibility that we have. They're setting up the kind of metrics, they're setting up the teams they need. If you hear about this with a lot of people, their teams are growing. They were 1 person 2 years ago. Now they've got 10 people on their climate team or their net zero team, or again, fill in the blank on what they need to do to kind of reduce these emissions. They're engaging with their suppliers. So it's supplier engagement programs, meaning they're educating too. And that's a really key component that we talk about a lot, Dean. I know you and I talk about this, but so does the industry. How do we
Mhm.
bring everyone up to speed in these kind of different areas that we need them to be? What does that look like? And when we talk about supply chain, it's something like the environmental product declarations, the EPDs. Are we seeing those? Are we getting those? Can we
Mhm.
use those to track what is going on in that kind of mix of real concrete information that we need to take a
Right.
look at this overall?
Yeah, and let's click into that a little bit, because first off, you've got these massive growth things going on. We have public commitments, we have regulation, and the economic aspect of this, of how people are engaging. Like, all this stuff is coming into a perfect storm. 18 months ago, we didn't even know it was even on the radar from a generative AI standpoint. And now we said 36 to 38 gigawatts of it is just going to be literally from generative AI. So, and the companies, like when we have these conversations, those one-on-one conversations and member meetings and AC meetings, last year it was a challenge. So you saw it, and it just keeps getting bigger. But what I think is really important to convey here is we have a aligned strategy and we have a structure. And we have to make sure that we are now utilizing our buying power to go at this, right? So I think that, two things is that that makes me very proud. First off, that we have the community come together, okay, that we're all aligned on this goal. Secondly, is that now the framework or the structure, the strategy that we have defined is held.
Yeah.
And as you said, now as you've gone into this in more detail, and we start saying, what actions are we taking? We got the work groups doing it. The EPD thing is a big deal, and carbon labels associated with it. And just for people to get an idea, just like you mentioned, you've got a carbon label on food. Why do you have that? Because you'd like to know what's in your food you're going to buy and eat. Okay, great. Well, now think about a carbon label for a building. The core and shell is the concrete, steel, etc. Like you said, 23 to 25% is concrete and steel alone of the global carbon emissions. If we're about to triple infrastructure, we're going to build 3 times more buildings, right? Not just power. We're talking about the embodied carbon in the buildings, and we're building 3
This isn't
times
hard
more.
math to know the impact, right, Dean? That's what
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
saying.
exactly. And so to me, the strategy and the structure allows us to be able to say, great, then we should be putting them on the buildings. And what I love is you've now aligned, we've got over 100 co-location companies that represent the global portfolios. Whether it's owned and operated or colo, or the point is, they literally are building massive amounts of this. So that element of a carbon label on a building is encompassing the elements of that, right? Core and shell piece. Then you talk about the carbon label on the equipment. So talk a little bit more about that, because we classified an EPD, and maybe explain what that is to people, for the equipment.
We are. And I guess, Dean, also what you're kind of highlighting too is we are in the room with the most innovative companies on the planet. I mean, like, that is what's exciting, is that I can't even begin to fathom the solutions that they're going to come up with. But they are the people who are coming up with them, right? You've been in the industry a long time. My parents, are people that came from the tech side. So, as short as my tenure has been here, it really, I've seen the kind of movement, and it is moving that fast, right?
Yeah.
And it's such an exciting place to be. And again, I know I digressed from your question that you asked, but we are looking into the EPDs for equipment. And this is where, and we made this announcement earlier this year, the iMasons has an official partnership with the Open Compute, Open Compute Foundation. Thank you. And we are working together because, again, this is where our complementary efforts and our strengths are really playing into each other to deliver on, as you put it, this carbon disclosure work stream. It is one that we have leaders on our side coming from, leaders on the other side, really highlighting what are the concerns and the causes. And the first one that was highlighted to us is, even if companies have some of these things, again, the environmental product declaration, life cycle assessment, sometimes we're not releasing it, or we're not being as public about it because there is this fear that we're not doing it right, or that, how do we share this information to do it right? And so, as you said, we're starting to bring this in ways that we anonymize the data and we look at it from a bigger picture. What is our carbon footprint? What are our things that we need to do collectively to do this? Not pointing fingers at each other, but understanding from an industry level perspective on what's happening. And so if you dive into what you said about environmental product declarations, and this is a way for manufacturers or, again, buyers to look at a third-party verified information about the various components going into the device. Primarily, it's been, it's the materials, but again, when you look at something like equipment, it's breaking down those component parts, right? And again, giving you the information to make what I consider to be informed decisions about this. We know there's going to be trade-offs. As we said, carbon is going up because we are building. It's that, consumption is not sustainable, and we know this is coming down the line. But again, if you can be very deliberate on how you are doing this, then that also leads to that innovation, and then that will lead to our reduction components.
Yep, and that leads to the change that we need. And so even though we're facing unprecedented amount of capacity, demand, and delivery, we have a structure to do it. And so I think for everybody, just remember that an EPD basically is a carbon label, but a carbon label can be something that's on there, but also an API call to get carbon information. It's the LCA that's done to generate the environmental product disclosure, so that you now have information about buying decisions. So that goes back to leading with our wallet. So I think this is, all these pieces tie together into a very effective strategy with the right people in the room, with the right buying power that can influence the right outcomes that we're looking for, even though we are facing unprecedented demand that would potentially compromise our sustainability objectives. So that's what I love about it too. We're all hitting it. It's just another problem to solve. It's just another thing to go at. But one of the things that what got us here won't get us there. That's another thing that's coming out in the report itself. So I'm a little it's interesting to me to see like this concept of the clean energy zones and things that emerged, because now we talked about power, people, planet, perception, right? Those are the big problems. And then we've got a structure like the Climate Accord to really go after this from the planet component. But one of the things that I think has been interesting is this concept about clean energy zones themselves. So you've been involved in this, you've been in the meetings, the different things, the analysis of it, but I think maybe it'd be important for me just to give a little insight into the structure of that.
Some context. Yeah, absolutely.
Because what you've outlined is that, we've got this thing for materials, equipment, and power. Great. Well, one of the big trends that came out of this is that what I believe is that we continue to organically grow in areas that are not master planned for us to be able to grow in, from a digital infrastructure standpoint. And that leads to perception challenges, because we're building great big concrete buildings and taking all this power. So now the local communities are challenged. So we said, how do we grow? How do we triple? Well, what got us here won't get us there. So a clean energy zone is a very simple concept. That is, it is a town or a city-sized master plan development centered around clean energy, serving multiple industries, including multi-tenant data centers. Very specific words in there. The point is, we are one of the larger demanders or consumers of energy, as is battery plants, manufacturing plants, and others that are also growing. Everybody's competing for this power. It's not just about getting it. It's literally about who's going to actually be able to get access to it and be able to deliver what they're doing. So the clean energy zone concept is, can we get rid of this continue to force fit in areas that are not necessarily designed for it? We need to actually move the data center to the power versus moving the power to the data center. And this allows us to now address all 4 Ps. And I love it because, one of the things you and I talk about is the economies of scale when it comes to investment. We do not have the technology solutions today to go after carbon capture and other things at scale. The technologies are still trying to catch back up. So that's a problem. But we have these companies that want to invest massively to go back and achieve their goals and achieve their business outcomes. So the thing is, the clean energy zones. Imagine if I had a 10 gigawatt, yes, I know these are big numbers, 10 gigawatt master planned clean energy zone that was designed for economic prosperity, ecological balance, and social basically integration. This is a master planned industrial complex that actually hits all 3 of those. As I mentioned in the beginning, ecological, economic, and social balance must be achieved. So a clean energy zone allows us to potentially get to that. Now, take your structure. Materials. If we have carbon capture and concrete, We can go have carbon negative concrete because we're building hundreds and hundreds of buildings and roads and everything else with carbon sequestration in concrete that builds those buildings. Like, this is the concept of it. Now you take all the other aspects and say, if we could do that, we can concentrate our investments, our innovations to go back and accelerate the outcome for it.
And what I like about what you've talked about, Dean, too, is hypothetically, let's say it is a smaller zone. It's a zone within a downtown core that's been repurposed. Or again, it's, it comes something different as we do it. It's now framed up the opportunity here to do something like this. And again, think about it with all those different moving pieces. Where can we reuse heat? Where can we implement concrete technologies that are not just for our buildings, but are for the roads that, facilitate the transportation? Where again, offline times or offline times. I can talk.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
You knew what I meant. We're using these in ways, again, that support and supplement all of our areas of life, not just our digital footprint, but again, our mission critical services, our schools. How are, people learning and moving into this? What are the various opportunities for, again, just this kind of innovative thinking and opportunity that we have? I mean, that is what, to me, the clean energy zone represents. Again, wherever that kind of comes to full fruition, it's the idea that we can kind of get behind and look at this and see how it kind of plays itself out, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important distinction you just made, because one thing is not going to fit everywhere. In other words, you take the established markets, the largest markets in the world are in the United States. Secondly, ironically, APAC just passed up Europe, EMEA. It's a competition apparently, but the growth just in the last 5 months, they went and they're adding 2 gigawatts across there. Whereas a gigawatt in Europe are being added. But either way, the point is that if you look at a place like Africa, you may have 100 megawatt clean energy zone because Africa, as far as infrastructure, is smaller. But the whole concept is, can I master plan that development with that community and put in these things to go back and deliver it? Where you fast forward to something like in the US and say, I might have a 10 gigawatt clean energy zone. It's the same concept. You're just adding zeros onto it, but applying the exact same principles to go back after decarbonization and really compound the effect of your investments because everybody's coming together. So I'm very encouraged, because in the report, we also zoom in on Africa, Latin America, and India. And, those 3 markets represent 44% of the world's population, with 3.5 billion, with a median age of 28.8, but they have 5% of the global capacity. If we're talking about growth, that's going to go. So all 3 of those markets have a massive opportunity, and anybody in economic development, government side, investment, private equity, etc., please listen to this. You're about to go put money in. If you can align around a clean energy zone concept, specifically structured to the Climate Accords strategy around materials, equipment, and power, we can address all 4 of those and literally leapfrog in emerging markets some of the established markets. Okay, so and I'm getting on my pulpit here, so I'm preaching, but there's so much important information for us to convey.
Yeah.
So okay, we have some pretty challenging headwinds in front of us, of course, but let me just ask you a final question. Okay. What's the call to action here for those watching? What should they be doing around the planet section?
Well, hopefully you are, or your company is a member of the Climate Accord. And if you're not, please come join us to support these kind of collective efforts in carbon accounting, our maturity model, et cetera. climateaccord.org. Again, come on in. Participate in when we have these open calls for comment periods, or again, raising your hand to be a subject matter expert, et cetera. I mean, this, as I said, we want the industry feedback. We don't want one person. It's not just a me and Dean conversation figuring this out. It is really all of us doing this together, because that's what's going to make sense. Kind of for our industry leaders, by our industry leaders, for our peers, et cetera. Ask the questions. And I hope that is, to me, one of the biggest things is ask the questions to define and drive these informed decisions. We don't know what we don't know yet. And if we, leave it off the table, or we don't ask it because we're worried someone else might not, or again, it doesn't look quite right. Well, again, that doesn't help us get to a solution. It just kind of kicks it down the road. We're going to end up being there. And then, these decarbonization strategies, it's, it's our materials, it's our equipment, it's our power, it's our planet, right? The kind of our concept. And so how we play the role in it is putting it forward, the leading with our wallets, the kind of committing to the purchase of services, goods along these lines that align with the decarbonization strategy. Because guess what? Within the ICA, we highlighted, our hyperscalers and our colos. We have so many innovative tech companies. We have consultant companies.
Yep.
We have other trade associations that are across the world doing this. So again, linking up with them and what they are doing. This is your network to tap into to get to these solutions. And if we're not doing it, you know how to find us. Shoot us those questions too, because we want to follow up. I mean, we've even got a question today, Dean, about the stack, the software stack and things. These are the things we're getting into. And while we may not be able to define and answer that today, certainly our plan to answer it tomorrow or the day after, or however we get to it. And again, using this collective knowledge base to get us there.
Yep. Yeah, it's a team sport, like we said. Well, Miranda, thank you very much for joining me. I think your initial thing is so spot on. The marathon continues, but I'm confident in our ability to complete what we're talking about with leaders such as yourself. Thank you very much for your contributions.
Thank you.
Of course, and our governing body, our work groups, and our members around the world. So again, thank you for joining me, Miranda. And thank you for everyone else for, yeah, absolutely. And thank you again for everyone else for joining us as well. And as we wrap up, I want to remind everybody about the resources you can leverage as we take on the challenges of power, people, perception, and planet. First is the State of the Industry Report and the launch video. We'll be putting that back in the comments here, so you can just click on that and download and watch. Second are the webinar recordings, of course, that we've completed. People with Heather Dooley, great insights there. Colby Cox and Power. And of course, the webinar with On Planet with Miranda here. So all of these resources are available on iMasons.org under the Insights section. So that's iMasons.org/insights. And finally, please join me for the final of our webinar series. And that's on May 30th. Siri Denny from Schneider Electric will be joining me as we dig into perception, those challenges, and explore how data centers become good neighbors by balancing industry growth in an economically, ecologically, and socially responsible and sustainable manner. This ties it all together, so please don't miss that one. And as Miranda said, it's time for all of us to don our running gear. You got it? Yep. And continue on this marathon. Okay, I'm done with my analogies, but it will include sprints. I'm not done. It'll include sprints and long distance efforts, but we are all in it together. As you said, sustainability is a team sport, and the iMasons community is united to deliver a greater digital future for all. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. We'll see you at the next one.